My name's Kyle. I'm a recovered drug addict. Thank you, Tommy, or Jeremy for I don't know, both of you guys for asking me. Whoever is officially to be thanked, I don't want to leave that out. This is first time speaking in a DAA meeting, I guess. I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. I like the literature you were reading, the 12, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the best tool that we have, and it is just that. It really is just that. It's just a tool. For a long time, I worshipped the book like it was the deal, and it's really not. It's just a map to the deal. It's the best map I've found. A wonderful tool. So, strange talking to. I feel like I'm talking to a group of my friends and my wife. It's kind of strange.
You are, brother.
Yeah. You would think it'd be more comforting. It's kind of awkward, really. Like we could have done this on a group phone call. But I grew up in the Philadelphia area. My parents split when I was young. My dad kind of ran off, kind of not. He was not a full absentee father. He was a kind of like, I'm going to be at this baseball practice father, and was not there. And the few times he did show, he'd be pretty loaded. I vividly remember him getting in a couple fights with my coaches through the years, which was embarrassing. But my dad was in South Philly. My mom was right outside of West Philly, and I kind of bounced back and forth between the two. I know a few people in this area. This guy's wearing a Kensington t-shirt, so he's from the area. But my dad was an alcoholic, and he had some other things going on, and I can remember from a young age, and he was kind of a mean guy, and I remember I was not going to be like this guy no matter what. And I grew up with the same group of kids. It's a very strange deal that the ones who are still alive and not serving lengthy sentences are still like hanging out in the same park, this Huey Park outside of West Philly, which is really strange for 30-something-year-old grown men to still be doing. But for some reason, I always had this peculiar feeling that I was just different from them. I felt like there was kind of like this weird, like veil or like wall that there was them on the other side, and then there was me. It was kind of like I just wasn't really a part of them. I wasn't really a part of anything. I can remember being at family functions and feeling like I wasn't a part of them either. Like I was just this weird kind of social outcast. I didn't know what was missing, and it became clear around maybe 7 or 6 years old that it was like material stuff was what was missing. I grew up poor. I grew up there. There's row homes, and typically a family will have a full 3-story row home, and me and my mom would rent out like the basement of a row home. And I kind of knew like if I lived, like my best friend, he lived a couple doors down. His name was Jimmy as well. His name was Jimmy Burke, and he had sisters. He had siblings. I was the only child, which was another big problem for me. And I knew if I had like a full family with siblings and a full 3-story row home, I would be all right. But I got this piece of crap. I lived on an army cot. That was like my bed growing up. And somewhere in there, I busted my teeth out on a basketball court floor, and they sent me to a dentist who must have had a hell of a sense of humor, because this guy gave me fake buck teeth as a kid. I have pictures of me with this buck teeth, and they weren't even real. It's like, what the hell is wrong with this guy to give me these buck teeth? And I remember being super self-conscious of that, and I would get in a lot of fights over them. And my buddies, now, if there's anybody Jewish in here, this is nothing anti-Semitic about this. In the city, we don't have woods like you do here, so we would drink in cemeteries. We would sneak off the cemeteries and drink and carry on. There was a Jewish cemetery close to my house, and my buddies would all drink from like an oddly early age, like 9, 10 years old. These guys were drinking, and I was like, they're losers. I signed a DARE pledge. I'm not going to do that. My dad's a loser. I'm certainly not going to do it. But I for some reason, I was like drawn to these guys, and for whatever reason, I was 14, and we were hanging out in this Jewish cemetery, and they loved Old Crow whiskey. I don't know if it was cheap. It was like $2 for a handle bottle back then. And they were drinking Old Crow like they did every weekend, and they were smoking some weed, and those were both going around. And for whatever reason, it was the first night of spring break in my 9th grade year, and for whatever reason, I had some, hair on my chest that night. I said, why not? Why not? Tonight's a good night. And that book, that tool that Tommy was talking about, talks about an allergy in there. Talks about an abnormal reaction to drugs for me as well as alcohol. I couldn't see it then, but a normal reaction of your first time drinking, or my abnormal reaction looked like, it's still cold up there during spring break. It was freezing rain, and I started drinking. I did not plan on getting in trouble. I did not plan on breaking my elbow, and but anyway, I woke up the next morning, handcuffed to a hospital bed, naked, with alcohol poisoning and pneumonia and a broken elbow, and which was like a condition I was going to be waking up in for years to come. But that was like a first initial kind of, and you know, like I woke up, and it was weird because my grandparents had moved to Florida and they were in town, so it was like weird waking up to my grandparents and my mom sitting there with me like handcuffed, like, and I'm this good kid, I get pretty good grades, and I remember them kind of, you know, like, you know, did you learn your lesson? You're going to be a loser like your dad. I don't know if they said that, but I was like, you know, definitely not going to do that again. But what I had that night, and I don't remember much of it. I have a very shadowy recollection of that night, but I do remember somewhere in the first couple pulls off of that Old Crow bottle, for the first time in my life, I didn't care that I had buck teeth. I didn't care that we were poor. I didn't care. I felt like totally a part of this group of friends that I was with that night. Alcohol did something. I didn't feel 7 feet tall and bulletproof. I couldn't dance. I'm a white guy. I still don't dance today. You can ask my wife. She's here. I don't dance no matter what. But I none of that happened. But for the first time in my life, I was okay with being me, and that was pretty monumental. That's really what. When I took my first drink, I found what I thought I was looking for, and what I ended up finding in here. It was a spiritual experience. Something that I took changed me for like that. Nothing changed externally. Same group of people, same city, same crappy little basement, same buck teeth, but internally everything was okay. I was totally fine with all that. And so when I'm waking up in this hospital room and they're like, you know, you're going to do that again? I'm telling them no, but I knew in the front of my mind, I was like, I'm going to do that as soon as possible. And it was kind of like the Fresh Prince, you know, remember the Fresh Prince show? One little bit of trouble in that. I got sent to Florida to live with my grandparents, and I came here. But like Bill talks about in his story, Bill talks about that through this alloy. So through this mixture of my drinking and my thinking, through this alloy of drink and speculation, I formed a weapon, like a boomerang that would one day turn in its flight and cut me to ribbons. And that's what I had. I had a weapon. I had like an answer to life. I didn't care that I was this new kid at this new high school in a new state. I knew if I could get some alcohol, I was going to be all right. I was going to be totally comfortable in my skin, and I was going to be able to kind of interact with people. And I did that. I got down here, and I think I moved out of my, like, I was 14, and I was supposed to be living with my grandparents. And I found this buddy that I moved, which is odd that his mom like let some 14-year-old kid move in with him. But I moved in with them, and we were drinking and smoking weed, and this was like, I don't know if you guys are from here, but this is like right in the Oxycontin like cowboy days down here. It was a wonderful thing. And I remember, so my whole life I was like, I remember just like, and I'm still more than capable of this today. You can ask my close friends or my wife here, which is whatever. I have an innate ability to size you up immediately. And I'm either better than you or less than you. I'm never like, oh man, I met this guy Caleb and we were like, right across, you know, we were just two children of God doing the best we can. I was like, I met this guy's getting a face tattoo, loser. Or, you know, Chris, he's a landscaper, loser, not going to listen to a landscaper. Granted, I've been homeless for like 10 years, but I got this ego on me that can judge people from the gutter, right? Zach's a landscaper too, I see him getting red back. Not going to listen to a landscaper. I am homeless from 17 to 25. I'm smart. Somebody was just talking about 170 IQ. That's me. And I remember being in high school down here, and this kid Nick, I'm not going to say his last name because whatever, but this kid Nicky that I went to high school, and he had a boat, which was like amazing to me. And by this time, my mom had met a guy that had some money. His name was actually Rich. He wasn't rich, but he had money, and they rented a house on the water, and I was like introduced to this life that Bill once again talks about, like Napoleon returning from no St. Helena for me. And somewhere in my mind, I had felt like I became like wealthy. And I didn't. I was just a 14-year-old idiot. And I would have these parties out back of their house. But this kid, Nick, had a boat, and he hit a sandbar. And he flew like terrifying experience, flew 100 feet off of it and landed on a different sandbar and like broke his back and his neck. and they prescribed him these Oxycontin, the ones that I would stain the inside of my shirts for a few years to come after that. And I remember him getting that, and I was like, man, some guys have all the luck, you know. Like, I just, you know, nothing good ever happens to me. It's always somebody like Nick that gets these scripts, and I gotta pay for them and rob people to get stuff. And that's just the kind of head I'm walking around with. I'm walking around with, I would have traded my life for like anybody, you know. And certainly in the years to come, it got much worse than that. But it's so weird to talk about drugs in my story. So I started doing Oxycontin and cocaine, and I love both of them a whole lot. And once again, man, just like when I was 14 drinking that alcohol, and I don't want to mislead you guys. I'm going to respect DAA because I'm in DAA right now, but alcohol fixed something in me better than anything ever else did. Alcohol did it, but when I found these oxys, it fixed it quicker. It just fixed it a lot quicker, and they were really cheap back then too. And man, I was I think I was like 15 or 16 at that time, and by 17 I'm homeless, right? By 17 I met, which is really strange. I had this buddy who was like 2 years younger than me, and he introduced me to his friend who was like in his 40s, this friend of a 14-year-old who taught us how to shoot up, and which is like really, as a parent, is like I would literally shoot that guy. I would go to his house and kill this guy, and he taught my 14-year-old and his buddy how to shoot up. And this guy taught us how to shoot up, and I was like, man, this is really what I've been missing. You know, I should have been doing this stuff since like third grade, and I wouldn't have worried about these buck teeth. I wouldn't have worried about nothing. And I don't know if you guys ever went down that rabbit hole, but it's hard to stay in the home with a IV addiction, right? So I'm shooting drugs, and my parents are like doing everything they can, and like I said, being a parent now, I can only imagine the heartache that I put these poor people through. But at that time, I got this chip on my shoulder. I got this guy, this rich, total dick, right? All he ever did was try to like be a good husband to my mom and take care of this loser kid who's like a 17-year-old shooting up in his home, stealing jewelry, stealing TVs, stealing his car every night. I would push it down you put it in neutral and you push it down the drive a little bit. And I'd come home and he'd be awake waiting for me, and I'd fight this guy who was older, and I thought I was tough because I could beat him up. And top of my resentment list, this guy Rich, he was a total dirtbag, and he put up with this for a long time. And at 17, they said you got to you don't have to leave, but you have to change the way you're living, or you do have to figure something else out. And I knew that this deal was still working really good in my life, and there was no way, like, you see these kids that kill themselves young, and I can relate to that, because I think that drugs and alcohol saved my life at a young age. I really do. I don't hate drugs and alcohol. I love it. They truly saved my life. I was so wrapped up in me that I could see myself being one of these kids that just blows their brains out because they couldn't deal with their own whatever, just so consumed with myself, with how the world had treated me and all this nonsense. And God forbid you throw a breakup in there. It's like, oh. I can remember my mom had a computer in her garage, and I would sit there, I'd listen to Whiskey Lullaby with like a spike hanging out of my arm, just crying. And over probably like a 2-week relationship, some girl smiled at me and she found somebody else. But that's the kind of deal I'm working with. And these drugs and this alcohol, man, it fixed it so good. And I'll tell you right now, if it fixed it like it did then, you would have Chris Kelly up here speaking tonight, or somebody else, because I would be sitting at some computer desk or in the woods somewhere crying and just fixing it, And fortunately or unfortunately for me, it got much worse than that. Living that sort of life. I remember all my buddies are going to, and I was like, I had a baby face for a long time, and I was skinny, and which is common for people who shoot speedballs, but I was very skinny. And I remember I turned 18 and I get a DUI. I'm like a block away from my mom's house. I'm going home to her house, and I crashed this Jeep. I had taken a bunch of those Somas. I ate like 19 Somas, and I'm trying to drive home. And I can remember like being in a ditch out on 19 in front of the McDonald's at Southgate, like waking up like, back on the road. And I get a block away from her house, and I hit this little planter wall on Florimar Terrace, and my Jeep rolls into the neighbor across the street, and that nobody comes out. I'm just this punk kid with a chip on his shoulder, and the neighbor comes out and is like, dude, what the hell, and instead of being like, my bad, man, I'm walking home, I got a mouth on me, and I'm grabbing pills and grabbing beers, and I'm throwing them in the canal out back of his house. And this guy like puts his hand on me, and I try to fight this guy, and he just like totally, I had no chance. I had no chance to beat him. 120 pounds soaking wet, I had no chance as a big guy. And not that it mattered what size he was, it didn't take much to beat me. And he wraps me up, and the cops get there. I get a DUI. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, these are kind of like stripes, first time the big boy jail, and so I go to jail, and I look so young back then. And I remember my first time in jail. I was at Pasco County in Land O'Lakes, which is not too big of a deal, but I was terrified. I remember them. They were like screaming from the tier or whatever. And I remember a guy grabbed me through the thing, grabbed my little blue jumpsuit. And I was like, man, and I did what all real tough drug dealers do. As soon as I got a call, I called my mom and told them they were going to kill me, and they get me out of there. You got to get me out of here immediately, because these guys are serious, and I'm going to have to join a gang, or they're going to kill me if I don't. And this poor woman, and really her poor husband, who was just along for the ride this whole time. They bailed me out. I did, a real hard time. I think it was less than 24 hours. At this time in my drinking, I'm not seeing that I need to stop, but I definitely need to scale back. Or this time am I getting low, I definitely got to scale back. I got to get off that. Ever since I got on this damn needle, things are just they're getting out of control. I mean, I've been homeless for like a year at this point. This is unbelievable. And within hours after getting out, I'm right back to doing the exact same things that I was not going to do. And for me, anyway, it always started with alcohol, because I'm not an alcoholic, right? There's one thing I'm not, and that's an alcoholic. My loser stepdad is an alcoholic. He drinks like 40 Coors Lights a day and watches the Alabama Crimson Tide, and it's like his whole existence is that. And goes on boats, and he's a loser, and I don't drink like him. But I would come home and I would steal a couple of those Coors Lights that I have no problem with. And within short time, I'm on a full-blown run, doing all the same stuff I was never going to do. And so, if you ever get a DUI, and that's not a requirement around here. If you don't have a DUI, that's cool too, man. I'm here for one reason and one reason only. When I drink and do drugs, I go on runs that I don't plan on going on. And when I swear them off forever, I seem to get loaded again, no matter what, even when I mean it with everything in me. You hook me to a lie detector test, I'm going to pass it. This time I mean business. I'm not doing it again, and I'm loaded again in short time. But if you do get a DUI, they force you to come to a 12-step group, which was ridiculous to me. And they sent me to, and me and my stepdad are actually doing all right at this time. I was back in the house, and I'm just drinking and smoking weed and eating my doctor-prescribed Xanax, doctor-prescribed Suboxone, doctor-prescribed this, and honestly, if you would have asked me at the time, I would have told you I was sober, and I probably would have meant it with everything in me. I just eat Xanax, smoke weed, drink around the clock, and eat these Suboxone strips, and I'm sober. And I meant that. That's how delusional a guy like me gets, and can be very well today. And I would go to this clubhouse on Main Street that has recently, they moved in the last few years, and I remember back then you could smoke in there. And they had this guy, and I'm doing all right, and I do okay on probation at this time in my life, and he got some weight back on me. I'm like selling cocaine again, and I think I'm some kind of big shot. And they've got this guy smoking cheap cigarettes, which is way beneath me. Newport guy, right? Newport. So you got clippers or something, I'm going to make fun of you. And this guy's smoking some cheap cigarette Buffaloes or something. And he's got the oxygen tank with the thing in his nose that he's smoking, and he's frail and he's old. Just in my mind, at that time, it was a complete loser. And realistically, I was the complete loser, right? But anyway, he's reading how it works, and he's, if you've decided you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, I'm like, I don't think so. I don't say that because I don't know that I'm full of fear my whole life, but I'm so full of fear that I just want you to like me, even if I think you're the biggest loser on the planet, that I'm like, yeah, I'll do whatever you tell me. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't think so. You can keep the oxygen tank, the cheap cigarettes. Like, I'm back at mom's house. She's got a hot tub. I had girls in there. We're selling cocaine. We're doing all right. And like, my alcoholic life is the only normal one. You couldn't have told me that there was anything wrong with the way I was living. And by this time, my friends who were not losers like me are like off to college, like starting families or getting married. They're having kids. And I'm just like, I think I'm a big shot because my parents live on the water. And I've procured a room in their house until they kick me out again. The most I could ever stay in there was like 2 months. And so that sort of conduct continues. Charges pile up. Homelessness, the homeless stints seem to be like staying longer. These bouts of sobriety seem to be getting shorter. And after, the cool thing about getting sent to a 12-step group, or the uncool thing, whatever you want to call it, is the seed. They talk about the seed being planted. The seed is only planted in the mind of an alcoholic or of a drug addict, right? So if you're not, don't worry about it because it'll never haunt you. But if you're like me and you have this problem, every time I'm in these runs and I get these lucid moments, I'm like, man, these guys had something over there. I got to get back over there. And I'm like thinking of how it works, or some stupid piece of literature that they read. I just got to halt, If I just wasn't hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And I was never tired. I promise. Towards this story, I would stay up for weeks on end, running from people who were not chasing me. And but I would come to different 12-step groups, and I was a big fan of NA back then. I really loved NA. Way cooler than AA. There was girls there. There was younger guys there. And I mean, I'm in my early 20s, so like the guys that I'm thinking are like old as hell are my age now. If you were 35, 40, you might as well quit drinking. What do you got to live for? And that's how I looked at it. You're in your early 20s, that's how it looks. And I would go to NA. And I don't want to take a dump on any programs because I really never even tried to do anything around there. I just came. I remember picking up multiple year key tags being loaded, and like they knew, like they had never seen me. They're like, "Who's this guy that can't stay awake?" He's like, his jeans look like Swiss cheese. Like got cigarette burns and blood everywhere, and I'm picking up these key tags. Just a total whack job. Like I totally have this idea that like if I present the right stage character to the world, you guys will like me. And that's all I really want. That's all I'm going through life is like, I'm just like begging for your acceptance. I'm begging for you to like me. Doesn't matter what I think about you. I could think you're the lowest piece of crap in the world, some stupid landscaper, but I'm desperately want you to like me. And I remember this one time I'm homeless for probably 6 months or a year at this point. I'm walking through Gulfy Square Mall, which is a lovely mall. And I'm on a phone that doesn't work because I can never keep a $30 phone bill back then. It cost for Metro. I can't keep it on. And I'm walking on a phone that doesn't work, talking to somebody who's not on it, talking about this big drug deal I'm trying to make. And I got it. I got 2 keys for it. I don't know. Totally just out of gas, like totally in left field. And Bill, I love that book, and I love Bill's story, and I relate with him so much. And Bill talks about business and financial people were my heroes. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. And I didn't relate to that, but I relate to it today because, like, guys who are making a lot of money were my heroes. And I wasn't thinking of, like, Henry Ford, probably like Bill was. I'm like Pablo Escobar. And I'm so far off of that. I'm so far away from that kind of level of, I'm like shooting up pieces of seashell at this point in my life that are on the floor that I think, my mouth is numb already, and everything I put in there I'm like, oh, this is definitely something I lost, and but I think I'm some kind of big shot, and I'm blessed to I've ran into this group of guys in Alcoholics Anonymous that literally transformed the way I looked at sobriety, and these guys, for the first time in my life, I ran into a group of guys who were. They were happy and sober at the same time, and they were younger. Not actually, they weren't all younger, but they were happy and sober at the same time. And I'm a know-it-all, right? So you don't have to tell me much. I know everything. That old saying, you tell an alcoholic something, but you can't tell him much, or however that goes. And that's me, man. And I'm like, I get it. I can read the shade. I know, we got to do those steps. And I had got a big book in some bout of sobriety. I got this poor bastard Sebastian to sponsor me, and I got a big book that I had no intention of reading. And I'm like, I just put on this front, like, I got the book, I'm gonna read it, and I had literally zero intention of reading this book, but I've had it over the years, and I kept that book. And I meet these guys who are happy and sober, and I remember this was when I had this guy Sebastian, and he had me get a home group, and I got the 538 Club, like any self-respecting whatever, and I would come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm lazy. I'm a lazy guy. I'm a real lazy guy. So when I come to a meeting and you're talking about easy does it and maybe do a step a month or don't even mention the steps, like I'm all for that. I'm all for just showing up here and putting the plug in the jug. Unfortunately for a guy like me, and maybe this works for some, I don't know. All I know is my own experience. But the second I stop drinking and getting loaded, my head starts going crazy, right? And it doesn't start day one's usually okay. But what these guys I ran into were explaining to me was that, no, dude, drugs and alcohol were not our problem. They were our solution. And our problem was sobriety. Every time I would get sober, my problems would begin. Every time I would get sober, my head was like a piston in an engine. It would start slow, but it would just start thumping faster and faster and faster. And then you add this time of getting loaded and the terrible things you do. Now there's even more stuff to think about. What I did on my last run, who I screwed over on my last run, all this money I owe. Bill talks about he would net a couple dollars and he would have to pay back the delicatessens. And I was the same way. I would get some money and it would just all be for fronts that I had paid out if I bothered to pay them back at all. And I could relate to that stuff. And these guys they made an impact on me. And I didn't get sober. I didn't get sober for years after that. But I remembered that and I was in this 5:30 group. And these guys were talking about God and talking about the steps, and they wanted me to come to their meeting. And this woman, Sandy Beach, was going to speak there. And I was like, who the hell is Sandy Beach? And I don't care. I don't even relate to women. I don't even much like women. Like, when I'm getting loaded, I have no need for them, really. Whatever. Take that for what it is. I don't really care much about that. And I was just like, who the hell cares about Sandy Beach? And I go because I want to be cool. So I go, and this marvelous speaker, and he was, man, and he said a couple things that really reached me. I remember his daughter had just been killed, I think, and I think it might have been the first meeting he spoke at after. It was like right after she got killed, and he was talking about immediately after she was killed, he immediately went to God. And this is a guy who was sober in AA a long time, this guy Sandy. His daughter was killed by another AA member, and the first thing he did when he got the news is he sat down in his chair and he went to God and he said, God, no matter what happens, this is not going to change how I feel about you. And I was like, wow, that is remarkable. And even loaded, I was like, that is pretty powerful stuff there. And he had these little nuggets, and I talked to him a little bit after the meeting, and nowhere close to getting sober, but he made an impact on me. And I would get loaded for a few more years, but I always remembered this group of guys because I come to AA and different 12-step fellowships, and it starts talking about the spiritual stuff. And I grew up in a particular religion, and I don't have nothing bad to say about that religion. I had a very bad perception as a kid, and I stopped going there when I was like 10 years old. So I have a 10-year-old's conception of God that I'm arguing with grown-ups. I'm homeless, and I'm arguing with grown-ups who are trying to tell me about God, people who have had their lives restored by this power. And I'm like, no. I learned in the school when I was 8 that, he's judging. Like, literally, a child. Like, this is something, I have kids today. I have a 7-year-old who would, have a similar argument. Like, no, they're mean. What? And that's what I'm coming at you with at 25 years old. That's what I'm coming at you with, in my 20s, a loser who has literally just everything I've touched has been burnt to a crisp. And fortunately or unfortunately, the only thing that was able to let me hear anything was pain. I put myself through a lot of pain. I would have blamed everybody else under the sun. I blamed Chris here. I blamed him for a little while about a couple things. I remember, so I get another charge, and I end up in Hillsborough. I'm a jail traveler. I've never been in the same jail twice. I travel. I've been to Hillsborough. I went to Hernando County when it was private owned. It was a wonderful place. It was amazing. I remember going in there, and I called my mom after a couple of weeks, and she was like, "You're not begging me to get you." I'm like, "I'm fine. I'm doing great in here." We got there was hot and ready pizza every Friday, although it was not hot by the time you got it. It was still better than jail food. And but I'm in Hillsborough County on my last on what I thought was to be one of my last runs, and I'm in there on another DUI charge. But by this time I'm seasoned, and I'm going 110 down Hillsborough Avenue at 4 o'clock in the morning, and at this time in my life, I'm like, I'm going through these weird, like, that. This is about the time. I don't know if you guys did any of that bath salt stuff when I was going around. That was like the epic shot, by the way. So if you go back out and give that one a try, that one will be in a submission real quick. That's like an immediate psychosis. Like immediately, like you take the tie off and you're like, we gotta run. We gotta run. They're coming. And it's scary, right? And when you're in that deal, it's terrifying when you're there, but it's like it's so real. And I remember coming off of some of that stuff, being on it for months on end, and like for weeks still, like being like, was that real? You know what I mean? And I remember I smashed my cell phone with like a dumbbell because I thought the feds were listening. By the way, the feds don't care about homeless people. Maybe they do. I don't know. That's Caleb. But typically, in my case, they don't care. They don't care. There's not gang leaders looking for homeless that don't have any gang activity going on. I'm just this loser, and I'm running from all this stuff, and I get this charge. I get pulled over, and whatever. So the whole deal, I was able to get it down to a reckless driving, which I thought I was like, I beat the system here. It's not another DUI. And apparently, it's the same thing as another DUI. You have to go to DUI level 2 class. You have to go to double the AA, double the whatever. You have to pay double the fines, all that good stuff. It's just not called a DUI. And in fact, after being sober a little while, I've had driving jobs. And they look at it as another DUI as well. So if you're smart like I am and you think you got away with a reckless, you're in for a real treat. But anyway, I'm on this probation, and by this time in my getting loaded, I can't pull a couple days together anymore. Like there used to be a time when I could pull a week or two and get sober at mom's house and pull it together and get a job. And at this time in my drinking and getting loaded, I got like 3 or 4 days. I can't even get through the sickness anymore. I used to be able to get through the sickness, and I would always tell myself, if I could just get through being sick, I'll never get loaded again. And I would get through being sick, and I would be loaded again. And I always got a plan, right? I'm just gonna, if I just do this stuff on Saturday, I can't get sick. And I got this allergy, and Saturday turns into every day, and I'm at the end of my deal, and I cannot stay sober, man, and with everything in me, I want to stay sober at this point in my life. I would do anything to stay sober, and I'm popping, and over the years, I would pop back in and out and whatever. This is DAA. I'm a home group member here. I'm also a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous literally saved my life, and I would turn up in these Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I knew that people were really nice in there. So sometimes I might be there for a cigarette or a meal, and sometimes I might be there for like really looking for an answer. And I don't know, is Eric in here? Yeah, he's back there. So I remember Eric's one of the first people I met around here, Eric and Chris and some of these guys, and I met Eric, and that paper goes around where they put their names on it, and me and my buddy were getting loaded, and we thought it'd be a good idea to prank phone call these people on the list. And this poor bastard, Eric's the only one who answered. And we pranked him, and then, but later on, I'm getting more serious, and I would call Eric, and I'd be like, hey man, can you take me to a meeting? And I knew that Eric would take me to eat as well, and he would give me cigarettes. And so I would meet Eric at Main Street, and he would take me to Burger King on Main and 19, and he'd give me whatever cigarettes he had. He'd give me about half of what he had. And I'm judgmental, and they were not Marlboros, they were not Newports. I was like, Jesus, these 305s again. homeless as hell, judging this guy's cigarettes. And Burger King, I've called him multiple times. I think you could take me somewhere nicer than Burger King. And man, I tell you what, but I won't speak for anyone. I'm such a tunnel vision, selfish creature at this point in my life. I can't see what's really going on. I didn't see till I was sober a few years when I found out that Eric was homeless at that time, recently sober, homeless, living on a bench at Sims Park, giving this idiot half of his cheap cigarettes and buying me Burger King, right? And that's the sort of deal that I found here, is the love of strangers, right? The love of strangers literally changed my life, and I'm too blind at this time to see that this guy's doing this stuff, and I end up getting like in this little, I just can't stop drinking, and I know that I'm going to end up in prison. In fact, my probation, I have mail-in probation in Hillsborough County. Very easy to pass mail-in probation. You just send them I think it was like $70 a month at the time. I can't pull it off. I can't send them the money. I'm behind a couple months. And she's like, dude, like, you need to pay or you're like looking at charges here, like serious charges. You're going to go up the road. And I pop in AA, and I run into this group of people I'd met, and they're still happy and sober, and their lives are getting better still. And Chris is still a landscaper, though, which is kind of, you know. And I talked to Chris, and I asked him to sponsor me, and I start going through these steps with some kind of zeal, you know, some kind of whatever. Not all of it, but just something. And I'm getting through them, and I write a fifth step, and or write a fourth step. I do a fifth step with him, and I leave the most important things in stock. You know, those weird things that I'm not telling nobody. You know, because I'll tell you about the cool stuff, and I wish to God I had like some kind of, like, I shot somebody, because back then I would have deemed that as cool, you know, which is insane. That's not cool. That's completely insane. If you have, that's whatever, but it doesn't make you cool around here. But I thought that stuff was cool, and I'm leaving some weird stuff off that I did when I was a kid, you know. And I remember I called him with some kind of newcomer problem. I love newcomer problems. They're so real. They're just so. I think it was like, you know, my mom. This bitch, I've been not welcome in her house for many years, and now I'm still not, but she has now allowed me to sleep on her back Florida patio room. And when she was at work, which is something a 25-year-old man should also be doing, I was to not be there. And I'm like, this, you know, I've had it, and I call Chris, and this woman doesn't understand. I've got like 4 or 5 days now, and she just doesn't get it. You know, I'm changing my whole life around. I'm involved in the steps. I'm involved in AA, and he told me something profound. He told me to get my head out of my ass and help somebody else. And I was like, clearly he didn't hear what I said. This woman she's just a tyrant. She's always been that way. So I, you know, and like I've always been, I laugh it off and, oh, you're so right, Chris, because I want you to like me, and you're cool, and you have tattoos, and I call him like later on, and I go, this is at night now, which is when my head really thumps, is at night. I don't know if you guys are like that. At night I really get going, and I'm like, Chris, I said, I'm gonna drink, man, and it's like, that matters, you know. Like, he already knows I'm gonna drink, and he's like, dude, you need to get your head out of your ass and go help somebody, or you're gonna drink. And I didn't take the advice, and I said, you know what? I said, I'm gonna go get loaded, and I went and got loaded, and I went on what was to be my last run for a while, and I got loaded, and I came back, and I was really willing to do anything, even some stupid advice like that. It makes no sense. These steps to a smart, high IQ athlete like myself, they make no sense to the thinking mind, right? I'm looking at prison, I've got all these fines, I'm back paid on probation, which is like not much, you know, $70 a month times 4, you know, but for a guy who can't keep a $30 cell phone bill on, that's a lot of money, you know. And I'm like, I'm just willing to do whatever, and I get a different sponsor, and I go through these steps quickly, right? It was not, I never got a workbook, I never got a nothing. This guy got right in the book with me, and we got through these steps quickly. I think I was through all steps, 12 steps in like a matter of 6 days. I told him everything on my 5th step. I called him back with some more stuff that I was holding back. I said, I don't know if these guys would think I'm weird and not want me to come around no more, but I know I want to stay sober this time. I did it. And for the first time in my life, I'd been coming in and out of 12-step groups for like 8 years at that point. And for the first time in 8 years, I came to the A Club the next day, and I felt like I had earned a seat in that place. I felt like I belonged in that room with these people. I felt like I was one amongst many, which is all I really was looking for my whole life. And my life got great, man. I was able to do a bunch of cool stuff that if you're new, it doesn't matter at all to you. International convention in Atlanta, like, okay, cool. But I went there, you know, I did some cool stuff. I went to Africa, which was cool. You know, I met a lot of cool people. I did a bunch of great stuff, and I got the weird thing about Alcoholics Anonymous and this God that I've been introduced to through the 12 steps is so amazing. And the crazy thing about it is, for the first time in my life, anything that's ever produced an effect like this in my life, I'm like willing to chase the homelessness, right? The first time I drank, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. The first time I shot cocaine, I was like, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. Same thing with heroin, I'm going to do this the rest of my life, and I'm willing to just jeopardize everything for it. I get into Alcoholics Anonymous, I do these steps, I have a peace that I had found in drinking and doing drugs from just doing these steps and helping others, and I just kind of back away from it. I mean, it's the craziest thing that only God has that effect on me, where I could just, thanks God, it's going so great, I'm just gonna let the new guy, let Jeremy handle this stuff, you know. And I got a good job. I met a great girl in a halfway house, which is where you meet great girls. And everybody told me, don't date that girl. And I just did what I wanted, and I dated her, and we had some issues that happened, and I was so far away from Alcoholics Anonymous and God at that point that after almost 6 years of doing this deal, sponsoring people, knowing that book, right, just like we started, that book is a tool, right? That self-knowledge don't fix this deal. I'm here to approve that message. Like I can quote that book inside and out, and if I'm not doing what's prescribed in that book, it doesn't matter at all. And I am almost 6 years sober. I leave my home group. I go to my home, or where I was estranged from at that time. I was not welcome there, really. I shouldn't have showed up at all. And my girlfriend is drinking a Mike's Harder lemonade. And I've been corrected on this portion of my story, so I'm not going to say that. But Mike's Harder lemonade didn't exist so it was just regular Mike's Hard. And I wasn't a fan of that anyway, but I was like, certainly harder, no big deal. I drank it as carelessly as though it was ginger ale. And this allergy, man, I'll tell you what, this allergy, I believed in it. I didn't question it. I was never like, oh, that's not really true. But in me, this allergy was literally waiting for me right there. After 6 years, I took a sip of this. I said, this is stupid. This is weak. I'm going to go to the liquor store and buy a bottle of whiskey, which I really like. I procured a bottle of whiskey, which was just right across 54, 2-minute drive, and I returned home 45 minutes later with a bag of cocaine, a bag of syringes, and the bottle of whiskey. And man, that was like, that is, by the way, if you taking a sip of Mike's Harder lemonade and shooting cocaine for the rest of the night, that's an abnormal reaction. I promise you, I've read the can multiple times. Sometimes I'll check at Wawa still. I'll grab that Mike's Harder, and on the warning, and none of it says like may lead to shooting cocaine, homelessness, job loss. This is what happened to me though, and I'm like, okay, well, get me some Dilaudid. Like I need something to come down from, and I couldn't believe the price of Dilaudid. Oh my God! After 6, I'm like used to paying $10, and she was like, "Oh, you get 4 of them, you get a deal. It's $100." I was like, $100, and so I had just gotten a $10,000 or $12,000 bonus check from work, and I knew this allergy. I'm not the kind of guy who's ever gotten like if I get the paycheck and I start getting loaded, an armored truck couldn't bring the paycheck home from work. That's just how I've always been. I've never had the sensation of getting a nice paycheck, say $1,000, and buying my $100 piece of crack that I like to start off with, and being like, that was really good. We'll save the rest for next week. I'm a whole paycheck kind of guy. And I knew that this whole bonus check, as soon as I started getting loaded, was going to be spent. And it was all spent that weekend. We went through every dollar of it. And we do these Dilaudid, and they press them with fentanyl, I guess, nowadays, which I'm a big fan of, but didn't agree with my girlfriend at the time. And we wake up and she's blue, and I have to, I'm carrying her to the cold shower, and I'm calling the ambulance, like, and what do you do here? And they're like, oh, well, you have to do CPR. And I'm like, well, I'm a truck driver and a student barber. I don't know nothing about CPR. And I break her chest plate doing the CPR, which she cursed me for a while. And if that happens when you have kids in the house, CPS shortly thereafter follows and takes your children away from you, which happened with us. And if you're a mother or a father in this room, I know it's a hard deal, but that's what happened to us. And this happened so fast. Like, this allergy took hold so fast. I could not believe how, like, you go from respectable, sober human to like loser, junkie, wife's OD'd, kids taken, the job is right around the corner, about to be within a week it was like all gone. I was like, holy, like, I could not believe it. And I told myself, I said I know I'm going to spend this bonus check. I said, this allergy's got a hold. I know I'm going to spend this check, but I will return to Alcoholics Anonymous on Monday. And I believe that. I really meant that. I was like, I'll get somebody to sponsor me again. No big deal. I know what's in the book. I know what the book says. I know what to do. And I didn't draw a sober breath for 6 months, man. I tried everybody. I tried every sponsor you can imagine, whoever you respect or disrespect. I tried all of them. I got this poor old guy. I thought he was like more spiritual because he had the 30-something years, and he misquoted. He didn't misquote the book. He said something wrong. I'm a history guy, and something so significant happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous that I got real interested in the history. So I love the history of AA now. And he said something wrong about the history, and immediately, this guy's a hack. He's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's sober, 30-something years, feeding me tomato soup because that's all I could stomach at the time. And he's an idiot. And I just did what I wanted to do, and that's how I would recycle or run through these sponsors. And it's a tough deal to have. You know, they talk about having a head full of AA and a belly full of beer or whatever that would equate to in DAA. I don't know. Same idea. I had heroin in me too, so whatever. But a head full, like I considered myself prior to that like a chronic relapser. I really only have one relapse, right? If you are an alcoholic or a drug addict of my type and you haven't done all 12 steps, you can't possibly relapse. You're just doing what alcoholics and drug addicts do. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. What that means is not that I need to stay away from this stuff, excuse my mouth. What me being an alcoholic and a drug addict means is I will most definitely get loaded again, 100%. No, I have no say-so against it. Without a miracle in my life, I'm getting loaded again. I know that today. I've got 4.5 years back into this deal, and I know that without a miracle, a literal miracle, God literally reaching His hand down and doing something in my life, I'm a dead man. I'm gonna die with one of my sponsors through the years, a bottle of whiskey in my mouth and a needle in my arm is what he told me I deserve. It's Bob, by the way. You guys know Bob. Psychopath. I love Bob. Haywood. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that guy. And he's dead. He's 100% right, and that's what I deserve, and that's what will happen to me without a miracle in my life. The cool thing is that tool is a map to a miracle. It's like some of you guys are, not that being young means nothing wrong, but I remember the Computers for Dummies book. They had everything for dummies. Math for dummies, computers for spirituality for dummies who think they're really smart is this book. It's just a roadmap to a God that has done amazing things in my life more than once now. Because that happened, and I knew what I knew. The one thing I was sure of, that all this relapse was my wife's fault. And that's one thing I was positive of. If I didn't have this crazy woman and her crazy family, God, they're just so nuts. And I knew if I could just get rid of her. Like the last couple months, I'm like, God, I gotta get rid of this woman. I'm just paying all these drugs, and I'm going out now, and I'm buying 10 Dilaudid, and I'm telling her I only could get money for 2, and here's one, and I'm hiding them, and she's fine, and I don't get on a nod off of one, and so I'm like completely wasted, and she finally, this woman can pass it. It's an amazing thing how she can pass a drug test. She's on probation because they took the kid, and we have to this case plan deal, and she could shoot up and pass a drug test 2 hours later. I couldn't believe it. And every time she'd go in, I'd be like, she's going away. I'm going to get sober. My life's going to be great again. I'm going to get right back on the beam, on the 12 steps. Everything's going to be good. And she'd come out of there like, we're good. And I'm like utter despair, right? The 4 horsemen, they just hit me in the face like, oh my God. And finally, I wake up from one of my deals, which was at a reasonable hour, probably about 2:30 in the afternoon, and I come down the stairs of my mom's house because that's where we're living now. Me and my junkie girlfriend, we're 2 junkies living back at mom's house. Which is terrifying for a parent, by the way, for their kid to get sober for some years and now be loaded again with +1, And she's crying on the couch, and she goes, "The judge ordered me to rehab." And I was like, that's terrible, Yes. When he gets sober, everything's going to be great. She goes away to rehab, and I can't stop getting loaded because that is this powerlessness deal. My main problem centers in my mind, not my body. When I put one in my body, I go on these runs. But when I got all these plans to get off, I know exactly what I need. I got a head that will not let me stay sober. I got a head that brings me back to it every time. And I carry on for like 3 more weeks. And of course, she's calling me from a rehab about how this class was good. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing wonderful out here too. And I've been hanging out with Seth, and we're doing great. We're going to meetings all over the place. This is during COVID, by the way, which there is no meetings. And I think I got it all together. And I finally, whatever, hit some kind of bottom, I guess, sufficient to make an attempt, and God separated me from drugs and alcohol for what I hope to be the last time, but I know through my own experience I'm more than capable of throwing all this good stuff away. I'm just a few dishonest little scuzzy little decisions away from going right back to what I came from whence I came. And that's the crazy thing about this deal. The crazy thing is for me to get in touch with God. It wasn't like this 180 turn like they told me about in rehab for years. It was just this little slight degree change towards God. And just like I can make that slight degree change towards God, I can make it away. And it seems so stupid. It seems so like, let Ronnie sponsor this new guy or whatever. I'm using my home group as a social gathering, and I can sell steroids. Like, it's not that big a deal. I need the extra money, and it's just a slight little change, and that's all I needed to get back towards God, was a slight change back. And I pray that I never go back the opposite way too far. My life. Once again, I went through the steps. I had a different sponsor, and who is no longer sober today. This guy's no longer sober today. This guy saved my life. He was so smart, man. He was like so properly armed with the last name was smart too, but he was so properly armed with the facts about himself that he knew I was like a big book aficionado, and he knew to tell me, like, you know more about that than I do. But you're loaded right now at my coffee table. And this guy was just what the doctor ordered. He literally put my hand right back in God's hand, started walking this path again. Shortly after, I asked my then girlfriend, who had also been, and she had a couple weeks longer sober than I did, which was not cool with me. I'm used to being the ranking member of sobriety in the household. And so I asked her to marry me. She said yes, which is insane for a maniac like me. Like, people don't say yes to guys like me. We went and seen my best friend move to Hawaii, and we went and visited him, and we got pregnant while we were in Hawaii, and we got this little son that's like literally the bright spot of my life, man. This kid is just whatever, everything that I did wrong. I just hope that he does the exact opposite, and it's not looking good right now. So he's violent. He's like, he says F that now. He doesn't know many words, but he knows F that, and he knows how to use it perfectly. He'd be like, hey, you want to do this? Be like, F that. This kid is just the bright spot. I love coming home and just getting on the floor and wrestling with this little maniac, and that I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not the come home. I didn't have a dad. I'm not the come home and get on the floor and wrestle with kids guy. I'm the get home and talk about me. Work was tough. My boss sucks. The economy's terrible. Blah, blah, blah. That's how I am. And I don't have that today, man. On the right day, I should say. And I have this connection with a God today that has been paramount. This connection with a God that doesn't fail. I have this, and I had this leader, this spiritual. I put people on pedestals in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's a few people I have on pedestals. They tell you not to do that. If your sponsor tells you different, do what he says. My experience is some of these guys, these giants in AA, like Sandy, that lesson he taught, I've had a similar experience. There's guys that are in this room that I put on pedestals. But my son, when he was 2 months old, got really sick, and he went to the hospital, and he ended up in the pediatric ICU on a ventilator. And not for a second, the first thing I did was go to God and say, God, whatever happens here, this ain't gonna change how I feel about you. I learned that from you guys. That doesn't come naturally to me. And what the cool thing about that is, it was still terrifying, but God came with me. I got up out of that little waiting room, and God came with me, and AA just showed up. I got this insane sponsee at the time, just a maniac, and he's in there hitting on nurses and bringing lunch and food from Pasco County all the way to St. Joe's in Tampa a couple times a day. And then my sponsor's wife is there, and she's you guys go take a nap in the waiting room. And like, the love of strangers, these people don't know me my whole life. These are people I met here in Alcoholics, or here in the 12-step program. Whatever, man, I've been able to match calamity with some kind of serenity today, which is not my go-to. I'm a match calamity with self-pity, usually. Oh my God, why me? I've got some some medical stuff going on right now, and I don't know what's really going on with that yet. And the same sort of deal, man. I've been able to go to God and say, whatever happens here, this ain't going to change how I feel about you, and we're going to try to use this to the best of our ability to help somebody else and stay out of ourselves in the meantime. And I've had some weak moments with that, but I think I've been doing pretty good overall. And the coolest thing, I mean, and I have material stuff, right? I've got stuff that a person like me shouldn't acquire. Like, I have like an $85,000 loan sitting out in the parking lot right now. I have a home and like stuff that doesn't matter at all. But the coolest thing I have today is through stuff like that, and I have a sound mind today. I have literally a mind that does not wander off too bad. It doesn't go into the things I did yesterday or these horrors that it might happen tomorrow. When I go to bed, my wife gets pissed off at me all the time because I can lay down in bed and be asleep in like 15 seconds, like literally snoring loud. And that I'm a kind of guy who sits in bed and just thinks. I don't know if you guys are big thinkers, but I'm just like, oh my God, I can remember those buck teeth and this thing I did in the 9th grade party, and what did this person think about me, and what that guy said this to me earlier. What the hell do you mean by that? Is he disrespecting me and in front of people? Was this guy looking at my wife? And I don't have that too much today. For the most part, I'm a sound mind, and that is only through a God of my understanding. And what I have today through that God and through these 12 steps is the same thing that I thought I had found when I started drinking. That same comfort, that ease and comfort that I thought I had found drinking Old Crow whiskey and then sticking a needle in my arm, that same ease and comfort I found through this amazing God that doesn't fail as long as I stay tapped into him. So I know I'm at my time, and I want to thank the group for having me, and Tommy and Jeremy for asking me. That's all I've got to say about that. Thank you.